Have you ever felt like leaving it all behind? Leaving the stressful job, the spotlight, to find a peaceful place and live a completely different life? For most of us, it's just a fleeting thought. But today's story is about someone who made that thought come true right when she was at the peak of her fame. Her name is Jeanette Hicks. In the 1950s, she was a rising star on the Grand Ole Opry stage, singing alongside the legendary George Jones. She had everything an artist could ever want. And then she chose silence. This is not just the story of a singer who disappeared, but a journey to find the answer to the question, what is more precious than the spotlight? To truly understand Jeanette's brief, brilliant flame, you have to feel the air of the world she stepped into. The 1950s in America was a decade of profound contradictions. On one hand, it was a period of booming prosperity, suburban conformity, and a carefully cultivated image of the perfect nuclear family. It was the era of Eisenhower and a deep-seated desire for stability after the turmoil of the Great Depression and the Second World War. But bubbling just beneath that placid surface was a revolution in culture, technology, and sound. This was the dawn of the teenager as a cultural force. A rebellious energy was stirring, and its soundtrack was rock and roll, a thrilling, dangerous new sound that terrified parents and electrified their children. Elvis Presley, gyrating on television screens, was a cultural earthquake. This seismic shift sent shockwaves through the entire music industry, and country music was no exception. For decades, country or hillbilly music, as it was often called, had been a regional art form, deeply rooted in the traditions of the Appalachian Mountains and the rural South. It was the music of the working man, of faith, family, and hardship. Its temple was the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, home of the Grand Ole Opry. The Opry wasn't just a radio show, it was a cultural institution, a weekly pilgrimage for fans and performers alike. To be made a member of the Opry was the ultimate validation. The stars of the Opry in the 1950s were gods. This was the world that was both embracing tradition and bracing against the coming tide of rock and roll. Country music itself was evolving. The slick Nashville sound, with its smooth strings and pop-influenced production, was beginning to emerge as a way to compete with rock's dominance. But at the same time, a harder, more traditional sound was fighting to hold its ground. This was the world of honky-tonk, raw, electric, and unapologetically emotional. It was the music of smoke-filled bars and jukeboxes, with lyrics that spoke of cheating hearts, crying in your beer, and the temptations of the night. It was into this dynamic, fiercely competitive, and male-dominated world that a young woman from Alabama named Jeanette Scruggs would step armed with little more than a powerful voice and a heart full of ambition. The path for a female artist was anything but easy. They were often relegated to the role of girl singer in a man's band, paid less and judged by a different, stricter set of standards. But for a precious few, the dream of standing in that sacred circle of wood on the Opry stage was worth any price. Jeanette was one of them. She was about to get her chance, but in the whirlwind of 1950s, Nashville, a dream come true, could quickly become a gilded cage. Jeanette Scruggs was born in 1935, a child of the Great Depression, raised in the red clay soil of Alabama. Like so many future country stars, her earliest exposure to music likely came from two primary sources: the church pew and the radio dial. Gospel music, with its soaring harmonies and heartfelt testimonies, taught the power of conveying emotion through song. And the radio, specifically the crackling broadcasts of the Grand Ole Opry on WSM, beamed a world of dreams into her. She would have grown up listening to the pioneers, Roy Acuff, the Carter family, Patsy Montana, and then the new generation of stars who were shaping the sound of modern country. She was not born into a musical dynasty like the Carters or the Stonemans. Her talent was her own, raw and undeniable. Sometime in her late teens, she married a man named Hicks, taking the name that she would carry onto the stage. The marriage itself seems to have been brief, but the name stuck. It was as Jeanette Hicks that she began to pursue her dream in earnest. The exact path she took from Alabama to the recording studios of Nashville isn't perfectly documented, but it was a well-trodden one. It involved countless hours in small-town bars, local radio shows, and talent contests, honing her craft and hoping to be noticed. And she was. It was a classic country instrument, strong, clear, and infused with an aching sincerity that could sell a heartbreak ballad with devastating effect. It had that essential quality known in the business as a tear, a slight natural catch that made every note of sorrow sound utterly believable. Her big break came in the mid-1950s when she caught the ear of Pappy Daly, a legendary Texas-based record producer and music promoter. Daly was a kingmaker, the man who had discovered and was currently shaping the career of a volatile, prodigiously talented young singer named George Jones. Daly was also a co-founder of Starday Records, a label that specialized in raw, undiluted honky-tonk and bluegrass, a perfect fit for Jeanette's traditional style. Signing with Starday was a monumental step. It put her in the orbit of some of the most influential figures in country music, and it was Pappy Daly who had the million-dollar idea: pair the powerhouse vocals of his new female discovery with his explosive rising star, George Jones. Duets were a cornerstone of country music, from the classic pairings of George Morgan and Marion Worth to the later iconic duos like Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn. A great duet could be magic, the two voices weaving together to tell a story with twice the emotional impact. The chemistry between Jeanette Hicks and George Jones was immediate and electric. Their voices were a study in contrast that somehow created a perfect whole. George, even in his early years, had that once-in-a-generation voice, a tormented, soaring tenor that could convey a world of pain in a single syllable. Jeanette's voice was the anchor, stronger, purer, the steady, empathetic counterpart to George's wild emotionality. In 1956, they went into the studio and recorded Yearning. The song was a classic cheating ballad, a tale of two lovers secretly longing for each other while tied to others. Yearning, my heart is yearning, they sang, their voices intertwining in a dance of sorrow and desire. Just to be with you, my darling, but I'm yearning all in vain. The record was a hit, not a chart-topping smash like a Kitty Wells or a Hank Thompson might have, but a solid, respected jukebox and radio favorite that established Jeanette Hicks as a name to watch. The success of Yearning cemented her place in the Starday family and on the country music scene. They would go on to record other duets like the equally poignant I'll Be There If You Ever Want Me and The Life You've Lived. Each song showcased their unique vocal blend and solidified their reputation as one of the genre's most promising new pairs. The success of her records opened the biggest door of all, the Grand Ole Opry. In the mid-1950s, Jeanette Hicks was officially inducted as a member of the Opry cast. This was the absolute zenith for a country performer. At just barely 20 years old, Jeanette had achieved the dream that thousands of others spent their entire lives chasing. She became a regular on the Opry and on the burgeoning country music touring circuit. One of the most significant of these was the Philip Morris Country Music Show. This was a package tour, a traveling caravan of stars sponsored by the cigarette brand. that brought the music of Nashville to towns and cities all over America. The rosters were a who's who of country royalty. Jeanette found herself on the bill with artists like Webb Pierce, Porter Wagoner, Red Savine, and the Carter family. She was sharing a tour bus, a stage, and a life with legends. A young woman from Alabama, barely out of her teens, standing backstage at some municipal auditorium in Ohio or a dusty fairground in Texas, waiting to go on after Mother Maybelle Carter, listening to the crowd roar for Webb Pierce, knowing that in a few minutes she'd have to walk out and hold her own. The pressure must have been immense, but by all accounts she thrived. She was known for her professionalism and most of all, for that incredible voice. She was living the life she had dreamed of. She was a recording artist. She was an Opry star. She was on the road with the biggest names in the business. Her future seemed to be written in the stars. And that's what makes what happened next so profoundly mystifying. At the height of her success around 1958 or 1959, Jeanette Hicks simply walked away. It wasn't a gradual slide into obscurity. Her records were still getting played. Her spot at the Opry was secure. There was no public scandal, no career-ending flop. One day she was a fixture on the Nashville scene, and the next she was gone. The music industry, then as now, had a short memory and was always looking for the next new thing. Another girl singer would soon be found to sing the duets. Another act would fill her slot on the package tour. And Jeanette Hicks, the bright star with the powerful voice, faded into a question mark. For decades, her story ended there, leaving fans and music historians to wonder what could possibly have made someone walk away from a dream they had so clearly achieved. To understand the emotional core of Jeanette's story, we have to move beyond the public record of record deals and tour dates and try to imagine the world as she saw it. This is where the story becomes less about a career and more about a human being, a young woman navigating a world that was exhilarating but also exhausting and at times predatory. The world of a touring musician in the 1950s was far from glamorous. It was a grueling existence of endless miles on a bus, cheap motels, greasy spoon diners, and the constant pressure to perform night after night, town after town. For a young woman, this world presented a unique set of challenges. The country music scene was overwhelmingly a man's world. The band leaders, the promoters, the record executives, the DJs, they were all men. Female artists were a novelty, and they were often treated as such. They had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously, to be seen as an artist rather than just the girl singer. They had to navigate a landscape filled with casual sexism, unwanted advances, and the constant unspoken pressure to maintain a certain image. Jeanette was young, reportedly quiet, and somewhat reserved off stage. Eyewitness accounts from fellow musicians are rare, but the few that exist paint a picture of a sweet-natured but determined professional. She wasn't a hellraiser like some of her male counterparts. She was there to sing, to do her job, and to do it well. But one can only imagine the loneliness of that life. Far from her family in Alabama, surrounded by men living a very different kind of life on the road, it would have been an incredibly isolating experience. And then there was the George Jones connection. On record, their chemistry was undeniable. But in person, the dynamic was more complex. George Jones in the 1950s was a force of nature, an almost otherworldly talent coupled with a deeply troubled and volatile personality. He was already battling the demons of alcohol that would plague him for decades, earning him the nickname No-Show Jones for his habit of missing gigs. Touring with him would have been an unpredictable and often stressful ordeal. While there is no evidence of any romantic involvement between Jeanette and George, their professional lives were deeply intertwined. His chaos would have inevitably spilled over into her world. It's within this context that we find the most human and emotionally resonant part of her story, the choice she made. While the music world was left scratching its head, Jeanette Hicks had quietly returned home to Alabama. She reconnected with and married a man named Dewey Hand, a man completely outside the music business. And with that marriage, she made a conscious decision to leave Jeanette Hicks, the Opry star, behind forever. She became Jeanette Hand, a wife, and soon a mother to 2 sons. This is the rarely discussed incident, the quiet personal event that completely reshaped her life's trajectory. It wasn't a dramatic flameout, it was a deliberate pivot. She traded the roar of the crowd for the quiet of domestic life. She swapped the Opry stage for a church choir where she continued to share her gift of song, not for fame or money, but for faith and community. She raised her family, worked a regular job, and lived a life of profound normalcy in Bessemer, Alabama, for the next 60 years. At an age when most people are just beginning to figure out who they are, she had achieved a level of success most only dream of. She had stood in the spotlight, heard the applause, and seen her name on a record label, and she walked away from it all. This wasn't a decision born of failure, but of choice. She had seen what the life of a star entailed, the loneliness, the instability, the relentless demands, and she chose something else. She chose a family. She chose peace. She chose a life where she was in control, a life not dictated by promoters and tour schedules. And for decades, that was the end of the story. But there was one final touching anecdote shared on music forums, a story that could not be verified, but that perfectly captured her spirit. It was a story shared on a small online music forum, a story told by a man who attended local bluegrass festivals in Tennessee in the 1990s and early 2000s. He said that there was often an older woman who came to these festivals alone. She sat near the back, a quiet figure with a gentle smile. She didn't clap or cheer loudly, but she listened with incredible concentration, sometimes closing her eyes, completely absorbed in the music. One day, this man, a devoted music historian, plucked up the courage to approach her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "You look familiar. Are you Jeanette Hicks?" The woman's eyes were said to light up with a flash of recognition, a flash of nostalgia. She smiled slightly, knowingly, and said quietly, "Oh my, it's been a long time since anyone called me that." He asked her the question we all want to ask. He asked her if she ever missed it, the lights, the Opry, the applause. Her answer was the key to understanding her whole story. She looked out at the amateur musicians on the small festival stage, and after a long pause, she said, "I learned a long time ago that music is one thing, and the business of music is another. I never stopped loving music. I just found a quieter place to enjoy it." Her message was clear. She didn't lose the music. She saved it. She took it away from agents, producers, critics, and the demanding crowd, and she kept it for herself. She found a way to love it on her own terms. Jeanette Hicks died in 2019 at the age of 84. When news of her passing broke, it was not a media earthquake, but a quiet ripple through the small but loyal community of classic country music lovers. She died as Jeanette Hand, the name she had worn throughout her private life in Alabama. Local obituaries spoke largely of her as a devoted mother, grandmother, and beloved church member. Her once illustrious career in Nashville was mentioned only briefly. Yet in the small, dedicated corners of the internet where classic country music lovers congregate, news of her passing created a small but heartfelt ripple. Her death did not provoke a mass outpouring of grief. Instead, it sparked a quiet nostalgia and appreciation for a hidden gem. On country music history forums and in fan groups, The duet Yearning with George Jones was widely shared. Older fans recalled distant memories of hearing her voice on Opry radio. Younger fans, who had known her only as a footnote to George Jones, were really listening and learning about her for the first time. Their reaction was not grief for the loss of a great idol, but rather a celebration of a talent who chose a different path. Many commenters expressed admiration for her decision, seeing her life as a testament to the fact that fulfillment need not be measured by fame. Her death became a final opportunity for her story to be told, not as a tragedy of wasted potential, but as a song of self-reliance and dignity. Jeanette's legacy lies not in her records, but in her choices. Jeanette Hicks proved that success doesn't have to mean fame. Instead, it's about having the courage to choose a peaceful, meaningful life on your own terms. Her story is a reminder that true happiness can sometimes be found far from the spotlight. She achieved the dream of many, realized it wasn't for her, and bravely took a different path to raise a happy family in Alabama. She lived her life to the fullest, exactly the way she wanted to, and has no regrets. Jeanette Hicks didn't become a Nashville legend, but she lived an authentic life, and that's what makes her legacy the most lasting and meaningful.